Let's go back to the phone calls after this one clip. Let's grab clip number 3, Rob. We just heard Bob Schieffer say, I don't have a clue about this. I don't know anything about this. What are you talking about? Christians being sued over the issue of same-sex marriage? I don't know what you're talking about. It's not on my radar. This is one of the leading newsmen in America, and he's ignorant. He is enshrouded in this cloud of absolute ignorance, and he's supposed to be one of the leading newsmen in America. You and I know more about what's going on in the news than Bob Schieffer does, because he lives in this bubble where all he ever hears, all he ever sees is dispatches from people that are as ideologically biased as he is. It makes him malinformed. It makes him misinformed. It makes him uninformed. And yet he's supposed to be one of the leading journalists in the United States of America. It's just absolutely appalling. Now here is Steve Roberts, who is a journalist himself, and he's talking about the fact that it's interesting. Andrew Sullivan saying, look, I'm concerned about Christians getting bullied here, and we're already seeing that. I mean, the baker in Colorado, the florist in Washington, the photographer in New Mexico, the T-shirt maker in Kentucky, they're being bullied. They're being harassed. They're being pushed around. It's already happening. Andrew Sullivan says, look, that wouldn't be a good thing. And Steve Roberts here explains why you have such bias in the media. One of the things that's happened, this is off topic, but it illustrates the point. Since President Obama has been on his global warming push, his global warming crusade, there have been 92 stories in the mainstream media on environmentalism and climate alarmism and global warming. You know how many of those 92 stories in the mainstream media have referred to the fact that there has been no global warming in 17 years and 5 months? You know how many of those 92 stories? None. Zero. Zip. Nada. In other words, people who depend on the mainstream media for their news. That's why you listen to this program and AFR Talk. People who listen to the mainstream media would not have clue, one, that there has not been a scintilla of global warming in 17 years and 5 months. Now, they're talking about this heat wave down in Death Valley. Do you know that things were hotter in Death Valley 100 years ago than they are today? Did you know that? Mainstream media is not going to tell you that. The all-time record in Death Valley, 134 degrees, July 10, 1913, 100 years ago. And now they're thinking maybe today it'll get up to 130 degrees, and everybody's hollering about global warming and all that. Well, it was hotter in Death Valley 100 years ago. In fact, the EPA published a chart that indicates very clearly that the greatest number of heat waves we've ever had in America in the decade of the 1930s. Now, I got completely off of where I was headed. But Steve Roberts talked about bias in the newsroom on the issue of homosexuality. And Steve Roberts explains why, and we saw stories about gay marriage. It was 5-1. The Pew Research Center did research about the media tilt on same-sex marriage. 5-1 in favor of sodomy-based marriage. Huge ideological bias there, and Steve Roberts explains why. Let's listen.
Yes, and here's another thing that this coverage reveals. What's missing often in TV newsrooms, there are plenty of gays. There are very few people of faith and very few evangelical Christians who, in their own beliefs, would be against gay marriage. And this is always...
Just to clarify, you're not saying all people of faith are against same-sex marriage.
No, not at all. But I'm saying that if you did a survey of any newsroom in Washington, the number of people of deep faith who oppose gay marriage would be minuscule, and therefore you wouldn't necessarily go into a newsroom and find the same kind of people that you would in terms of gays. But that's part of what I agree with Terry that we shouldn't follow our background or opinions in reporting
or
the
at
news.
Least not define
but it gives us a sensibility. It gives us a set of interests. That's why we want diversity in the newsroom, because that's why we want women in the newsroom. That's why we want blacks in the newsroom, not just a question of political correctness, because we can cover the world better if we have more diverse people, and we don't have a lot of people of faith who would take the normal view, would take the view that same-sex marriage is wrong. There are just not a lot of people in newsrooms in Washington who follow.
Did you know what he said? He slipped. Did you catch that? There was a major Freudian slip. This guy's a winger left, and he referred to one-man, one-woman marriage as normal marriage. Now, he caught himself, but did you hear that? I mean, he understands that that's normal. It is natural. It's in accordance with the laws of nature, and nature is God. Same-sex marriage is unnatural. It is contrary to the laws of nature and nature's God. Well, let's grab a phone call before the break. Let's go to Shuck in Kewanee, Mississippi. Shuck, thank you for calling. Thanks for waiting. What's on your mind?
First of all, I'll make a comment about the other day about the unclean food.
Uh-huh.
Acts chapter 10, Peter's vision when the sheet's coming down from heaven.
Yeah, and what did God say to him?
Nothing is unclean.
Yeah, and what God has declared clean, man must not declare unclean. Very good. All right, Chuck,
Right.
What else is on your mind?
And what God has joined together, man must not put asunder. It is only 3% of the people of this country pushing this stuff, and the rest of us are letting them get away with it.
Yeah.
That's what's on my mind. That's what it just aggravates me to no end.
All right, Chuck. Well, listen, I appreciate that. And Chuck is exactly right that we are allowing them to do this to us. We are allowing them to do this. We've talked about this before. I had a column. It's in the stack here somewhere. But somebody's saying, why should we capitulate to rulings that come from the Supreme Court? And I read the quotes from Sandra Day O'Connor back in some opinion from the middle part of the first decade of this century. And, she admitted that the only authority that the Supreme Court has is a moral authority. It has no other authority. And if it issues rulings that are irrational, rulings that are illogical, rulings that are not consistent with the law, rulings that are not consistent with the Constitution, it is forfeiting its moral authority. And with this ruling, ladies and gentlemen, they have completely forfeited any claim they would have to having any moral authority to make pronouncements about the law or about the Constitution. And remember, the Supreme Court cannot order anybody to do anything. If the American people decide they've had enough, they're not going to put up with it, they're not going to do it, and their elected officials will back them up. There is nothing the Supreme Court can do. That's why I believe the only thing that can break the back of this is you have governors and legislatures in states that have marriage amendments, and they say to the Supreme Court, forget about it. We're not going to do what you're telling us to do. We read the Constitution just like you. You are wrong. Back in 2.